Do your doubles ever sound like this? Or maybe something like this? Do you wish that they sounded like this? Then you're at the right place. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Ari Teaches Drums, where I will be teaching you all facets and fundamentals of drumming. You probably clicked on this video because you are interested in evening out your doubles, cleaning them up, and that is fantastic because doubles are absolutely essential to a ton of rudiments like paradiddles, open stroke rolls, puttidas, and many, many more. So far in my fundamentals series that I'm creating here for you, we've covered grip, legato strokes, downstrokes, upstrokes, and buzz rolls, all of which are fundamental to the building blocks of becoming a strong drummer and percussionist. So what is a double stroke? A double stroke is when each hand plays two even notes. So unlike buzz strokes, which called for as many bounces as possible per hand, the goal of double strokes is to play two distinct articulate notes per hand. They're not buzzed or pressed. So what is the key to playing even double strokes? Depending on the dynamic and the speed of the double strokes you're trying to play, it will require different rotational responsibilities in your hands and your arms. So keep this basic fundamental idea in your head. The slower your double strokes, the more wrist you're gonna tend to want to use. And you should be rotating your wrist twice at a slow tempo. So for example, I'm not gonna put a beats per minute on it, but if I was just playing slower speed double strokes, something like this, then I want to rotate my wrist twice, right? You can actually see my wrist rotate twice. There's two clear even notes that are played. As if I was just basically playing two legato strokes in a row. That's the basic idea here. Whether I match grip or traditional grip, it's the same fundamental idea. So the key here is that when I'm going at this slower speed, I'm primarily using my wrist. I'm not trying to lift my entire arm, unless of course I'm at a real big fortissimo volume, then I might need some arm involved. But if I'm at just basic mezzo forte level or even softer, I really only need my wrist involved to play these double strokes. So that's for slow double strokes. But what about as we get faster with our double strokes? Well, as you get faster, I suggest you try using more arm involvement the faster you go. So if I'm trying to play double strokes at this speed, I can still technically play those all with my wrist, but it starts to become pretty choppy. And at this speed, I'm gonna have to start utilizing the natural rebound of the drum and the drumstick. And this rebound is in order to bounce the two notes. So essentially what's happening is your wrist should technically only rotate once the faster you go and produce two notes. So you'll notice in each of those double strokes, my wrist is actually only rotating once. It's only coming up and down one time, but I'm getting two notes. Well, how is that even possible? Well, basically I'm using a little bit of pressure on the stick, and then I'm getting my arm involved, and then I'm able to produce that double stroke by utilizing the natural rebound of the drum pad here in this case. A brief note I'll mention is that some drummers use a push-pull technique where they start getting their fingers involved. I personally do not use that technique, and I don't recommend it personally because for me, it seems much easier to transition from, say, legato strokes or some other pattern to double strokes if I'm really primarily only using wrist and arm, because that's much more related to all the different other types of strokes. I don't want to go too crazy with the finger action because getting out from legato strokes, it's much easier to get to this arm motion or using wrist. It's much easier to use my wrist to do that. So keep that fundamental idea in your head. Again, more wrist for the slower tempos and then more arm for the faster you go. So here's a few more crucial keys to playing even double strokes. First and foremost, and this is so key as a musician, use your ears and your eyes to match the dynamic, not only of each note on each hand, but between both hands. So we want to try to even out the sound and the quality of the two notes on each individual hand. So I don't want something like this, where I have a loud first note and a really quiet or ghosted second note. That's what happens for a lot of young players, and that might sound familiar to you. Okay, so what you want to work on is, well, evening out the sound on each hand and really just isolating it one hand at a time. So listening, right, with something like an exercise like that, which we're about to get into later, which is called double beat A-B. Really great way to practice hearing the individual quality of the notes in the double. Both strokes per hand should be played with as good of quality as you can and sound identical in dynamic. Like I said, use your ears for this, but also use your eyes in a mirror or a phone camera. Watch yourself as you're playing. If you see a visible difference between your first note and the second note, right, there's probably something you can adjust with your playing to make that better. All right, next is more of a feel concept. So you want to have as much rebound awareness as you can. And this is a physical feeling in your hands. You want to let the stick and the drum do as much work for you as possible. I like to work less. I like to be efficient, and I think most people do too. So you should try to do that with your playing. One of my instructors used to say this, one of my favorite things is he would say, get to know your instrument. You want to know, how does the instrument respond to the way you play, right? If I do something in my hand where I activate more wrist, how does the instrument respond to that? So the only way to do that is to get to know your instrument, be with your instrument more often, play more often, practice more often, and pay attention to how the instrument responds to the actions that you are doing with your hands. A couple more keys to consider. Consistency is key. That means doing something the same way every single time. Can you replicate these ideas with playing even double strokes every single time? Another fundamental key here is tension is the enemy. Really avoid over squeezing the stick or tightening. That's gonna not work in your favor. All right, my last key to think about here is that the rhythm is more important than the rudiment. So here's a quick example. 5-stroke roll, right? A lot of us learn this early on in our percussion education. Oh, 5-stroke roll, that's R-R-L-L-R. Okay, well, what if I play it like this? Well, I played the rudiment, but was the rhythm right? In this case, we probably want 4/16 notes to a quarter note or something like that. Digga-digga-da. So it needs to sound like 1E and a 2. So I have to work until I get the rhythm right. The rudiment is just a way for us to play certain rhythms. A rudiment is not the end-all be-all. So if we're trying to play a rudiment, we have to make sure that the rhythm is the most important thing of that rudiment. Not, right? I'm playing a 5-stroke roll, but I'm squeezing the stick too tightly and mashing it into the head, and so the rebound of that space is too closed. So keep this in mind as you're playing. You don't want your double spacing to be too closed or too open, because if it's too open, you're just gonna be slow and behind, and then if it's too close, it's not even rhythm, and you're not getting 4 even strokes in total if you're playing 2 doubles in a row. All right, I'm gonna show you guys 3 of my favorite double stroke exercises in this video. I hope they help you a lot. These may be exercises you already know about. First is A-B double beat. This really isolates the double quality in each hand. It goes like so. I would start at something like 100 beats per minute. And something I highly recommend is utilize the subdivisions on your metronome to your best ability. I personally love the TE tuner. It costs just like a few bucks on your phone, but the TE tuner is an amazing metronome. You can adjust the subdivision to whatever you need. So in this case, I'm gonna set the subdivision to 16th notes, and I'm gonna play that same exercise again, and I'm gonna listen very closely with my ear to line up with the rhythmic bass of this, right? And I'm gonna try to line up my 1, 8, 2, all those rhythms. I'm gonna try to line those up with the subdivision. 1, 2, 3. You want to take this basic double beat exercise and just play it at all speeds. At that speed, I was really trying to use mostly only wrist. But the faster you go, you might end up having to use a little more arm and utilizing a little more rebound. So let's say I was at 150 beats per minute. I'm gonna have to start utilizing more arm and rebound. So hopefully you can see the difference. You can even go back and compare the two. When I was at the much slower tempo, I was able to just play even double strokes with my wrist, and then the faster I went, I really had to pump my arm a little more in order to get the rebound and the speed that I was desiring to go. All right, next exercise on the docket here is Gallop. This is a really famous exercise in the marching percussion world. All right, so here's Gallop at 140 beats per minute, mezzo forte. And at this tempo, this is kind of a borderline between using my wrist only and using my arm. So at this speed, I feel like I'm kind of doing a hybrid of the two, where yes, my wrist is rotating, but am I moving my arm a bit to get the bounce out of the drum as well? Yes, I am. All right, and then what I would suggest with these exercises too, play them at all dynamic levels. So I want to practice my double stroke quality, especially low at my piano stroke dynamic, piano or even pianissimo. This is especially important for something like fast low rolls in marching percussion, and then also famous concert percussion excerpts like Scheherazade, where you have to play double stroke rolls super low at like pianissimo. So here's Gallop at 170 beats per minute. And at piano dynamic. Last exercise for you guys is going to be short, long triplet rolls. We have a lot of triplet rolls in marching percussion, so I would highly suggest that you practice an exercise like this. And something you can do also is isolate just one diddle on each hand. I will show you the full roll first, and then I'll show you how you can practice isolating diddles. And in case you were wondering, diddle is just synonymous for double. It's the same idea. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna throw on the 8th note triplet subdivision for triplet rolls here. Here's triplet rolls at 140 beats per minute at about a mezzo piano dynamic. So the tricky thing with some of these exercises is, how do I go from double strokes to controlling the pace of just the legato strokes? Because I start with legato strokes, right? And then once you add the double strokes, it's gonna require more energy, so to speak, in your hands to create the double, right? Because now I'm having to maybe use a little more arm and then a little bit of pressure in the hand in order to create the double. And when I say pressure, I don't mean squeezing, I just mean pushing the stick into the head a little more in order to create the bounce, right? Sort of another way to think of it. Again, something I said earlier in this video, the rhythm is more important than the rudiment. So don't just play these triplet roll patterns or gallop pattern without really listening for the rhythm. So in gallop, it was dig-a-dit, 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 right? 1 EN, 2 EN, 3 EN, 4 EN, 1 and a 2 and a. That rhythm needs to be there regardless of the rudiment that's happening. And then in triplet rolls, we're taking legato strokes and then doubling the speed of it. So eighth note triplets to then 6 tuplets. So if I was to play it in legato strokes, it would sound like this. Right? And so that's the quality of sound I want when I'm playing the double strokes. And I just have to use all the different tips I've talked about in this video and all those fundamentals and put them together and start listening for the even sound, start understanding how much rebound is involved and how much arm I'm using, how much wrist I'm using, and start to get to know my instrument as I'm practicing. So with this short, long triplet rolls, I would also speed up the tempo and do all different dynamics to practice. But something I want to show you first is how to isolate doubles on each hand. Gallop isolates the hands already. That's a great thing about Gallop, is that you're just focusing on right hand and then left hand. Each of these exercises is great at isolating both hands. But triplet rolls, the version I just showed you, is a full roll, full open roll. But if I want to isolate them, just simply play the double only on one hand, so like this. And I would practice that on both hands for the left. And a really common issue for young players is that they start to slur these rhythms. So it kind of turns into this. And that's because the space of the double is too open. Same thing with the left hand. It kind of turns into this for some players. And then it kind of turns into a pugada sound, pudada, where now it kind of sounds like 9lets, which we don't want in this context. We do not want. We want da 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 da. So I have to increase the amount of pressure, a little more arm motion, and close up the double. Right? Not this. That's the most common issue that you're hearing. So in general, you're gonna need to close up those doubles. Another big thing to watch out with SSL rolls is that one hand's not louder than the other. So something like this. That's gonna create an uneven sound, and we definitely don't want that. We wanna be consistent all the way through. All right, guys, thank you once again for joining me for yet another video in my fundamental series of drumming. I hope you found it useful today. If you did, please do drop a like, comment about maybe something you've heard differently from your instructors. I'd love to hear about it, and subscribe for future videos. Thanks so much. I'll see you next time. Ari Schiller out.